Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a US politics update where I am going to be talking about all sorts of things, but a lot to do with disinformation and the drive, I think, to take the US into a more autocratic status and thus an autocratic state. I don't want this to just be me hating on, say, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. But it will sound a bit like that at times. But you've got to think, why is it that I've been so obsessed with Trump for so long, actually? And Elon Musk, since he has taken this turn. I was not obsessed with Elon Musk when he was just busily getting on with Tesla. Didn't give him the time of day because, you know, you're being CEO of Tesla. Tesla seemed to be a pretty okay company. SpaceX were pretty okay, whatever. Didn't really care about Elon Musk. And as soon as he started getting involved in driving politics towards a greater autocracy and oligarchy or advocacy for that and right-wing populism, then I've got an issue, right? And that's the same with Donald Trump. Now, I said before that I think Trump is actually fairly vacuous himself, ideologically speaking. I do think he has sort of some... if you look at his past and his father being in the KKK, or sympathiser with them, getting imprisoned, all the way back when it was for that being involved in that KKK protest. I think you've got elements of Trump that I would think are probably not particularly attractive, should we say. But I think he's easily manipulated by people around him, and I think he has a team of Project 2025 ideologues around him who are driving him, and this, they tried to do this in 2016 to 2020, but he had the checks and balances from the establishment GOP that kind of reined him in a little bit from his worst excesses. Now, because at the time of 2016 he wasn't expected to win, he didn't expect to win the presidency, so when he produced his administration there, he had to draw in a lot of establishment Republicans who, as I say, tempered him somewhat from his worst excesses. Now in 2024 or 2025, he's going to come in and have a much more organized team of people who are ideologically pretty extreme. And this is going to present a huge problem. There's going to be a massive issue for the next 4 years. And the next 4 years is going to be, goodness me, fascinating to watch. But I think, and we're going to talk a lot about elements like China today, and whether Trump really is anti-China or whether he's just pro himself, and he has seen China previously as transactional, through a transactional lens, and so he's seen China as a threat. But as soon as China can line his pockets and give him more power, then he's all right with China. So it's not a kind of geopolitical analysis of China as a threat. It's very much an understanding and evaluation of him as an individual and whether China threatens him. And I think, you know, if the US does well, it's wrapped up with his sense of himself doing well. And therefore, you know, him doing well is the US doing well, and the US doing well is him doing well. But it's all to do with him. There's a lot of egocentrism there, as opposed to someone that's come in, say, and you might find it's controversial, but I think Biden's come in and said, I'm going to do things that I think, you can disagree whether they did actually do this and whether, you know, whatever, but Biden wasn't lining his own pockets, I think, when he came into power. In 2020, it was about, right, we need to do some things to get the US back on track after COVID. We've got supply chain issues, and we've got, you know, the economy to deal with, etc., etc. And we've got the threat of China, and so we understand Taiwan, and we're going to get the Chips and Science Act to get our microelectronics sector sorted out for our own strategic benefit going forward, etc., etc. So I think that was someone, you know, pretty standard to do with, you know, wanting the US to get to a better place, but wasn't really thinking about his own personal power. Biden wasn't like, right, I'm going to line my pockets and become more dictatorial. That wasn't what he was about, but it is what Trump's about, and that's why I'm so obsessed with Trump. And he's always had this inclination, or he's always been particularly vulnerable to those around him who have had those inclinations. So back in 2016 to 2020, it started off with people like Steve Bannon and Steve Miller, and Stephen Miller's back in this administration, but Steve Bannon not so much, but he's adjacent. But Stephen Bannon was, if you remember the SNL scripts, Stephen Bannon was the Grim Reaper of the side, standing behind Donald Trump. So that was the issue. Like, why do I dislike Trump? Because I think he's morally compromised, partly because he's so morally weak and ideologically vacuous, but also because and thus he is so easy to manipulate and manipulatable by these really sort of bad faith actors. Right. So we've had Joe Biden giving his farewell speech, and I think there's a lot to consider in this. He speaks quietly. They have to turn the mics right up, which is why you hear that kind of buzz, because he's so old now that he can't speak very loudly. But anyway.
His farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit.
The truth is smothered by lies told for power and profit. If you're going to take anything away from this video, that's it. What Biden said here, I think, is probably one of the most important presidential speeches of recent times, and it's quite abstract, but it's insanely important.
And for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy.
So that I'm pretty obsessed with disinformation and democratic backsliding. That seems to be kind of my thing these days. And when I listen to Joe Biden talking these kind of terms, it's talking to exactly that. And that's why I think he was absolutely on point there. Right, we're just going to listen a little bit to Chris Hayes, I think it is. Oh, no, it's Ari Melber here on MSNBC talking about this.
Politics or not. And we're talking about how America functions. We talk about democracy and rule of law, and sometimes those things are thought of almost only in relationship to the government, like the understandable attention about the effort to overthrow the 2020 election. But this warning is much broader, and it comes from President Biden in the farewell address. And he did it in a very specific way. He clearly wanted to speak beyond the moment, the news cycle today, tomorrow, Monday's inauguration, and put a marker down for history, hoping people listen sooner rather than later, but for history, which is what farewell addresses can be when they work, and discuss how cronyism, corruption, and what I mentioned, the attacks on the rule of law, combined with powerful billionaire elite cabals, can affect everyone's life, and he argues America for the worst.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern.
If we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very optimistic this time around.
And that's the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people.
We're going to work with President Trump.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
That is just some of what the president said in the farewell address last night, and we covered it here on MSNBC, and a lot of people, of course, are getting ready for next week in the inauguration, but these things can matter in all sorts of interesting ways. Even the tech tools that we have, which are increasingly controlled with certain agendas by people who then try to tell you with a straight face they don't have an agenda, and you can decide for yourself whether you think Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have agendas that have to do with their wealth, their self-interest, as well as politics that reinforce that. You can listen to them and decide. But even through these tech tools, we have evidence today that we didn't have in the first moments after the president finished speaking last night. and how his warning may have at least elicited interest in the critique that he was launching, because right after his address over the ensuing hours, the most popular search engine registered a spike in people wanting to know about oligarchies. These are Google searches for learning what oligarchy even means, because people obviously heard some of what the president said and wanted to know more. This is, of course, a reference to governments or power being controlled by a very small group of people, usually not representative, and usually with problems for everyone else who's not in the small ruling class. That's why when you hear the term ruling class, it often has a negative connotation.
And this is really broadly what this video is about, this growing move towards oligarchy and or autocracy, moving towards one person being in charge or one person with a cabal of very rich tech oligarchs around him and some other ideologues, but this is an eschewing of democracy. I think we are in a period, or well, actually, yes, we in the world are in a period of shedding off our democratic ideals, as it appears more and more the world is wanting to move towards, or is being led to believe they want to move towards, autocracy. And that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. This is just a snippet of Seth Meyers, actually, where he put some stuff together.
In America.
This is, we're going to look at Bernie Sanders here, and it starts off, I think, in 2024. So just recently in July, he's talking about how the US is, becoming an oligarchy. But this is not a new thing. This is Bernie Sanders over time.
We are rapidly becoming an oligarchic form of society.
The most important issue facing our country is the very rapid movement toward oligarchy.
This is a budget that moves our country rapidly into the direction of oligarchy. That's not democracy, that's oligarchy. This is what oligarchy is about. It is called oligarchy. Do we continue to slide into economic and political oligarchy? This is what oligarchy and plutocracy look like. In many ways, we are moving toward an oligarchic form of society. We are moving in the direction of oligarchy. Are we a democracy, or are we more and more moving toward an oligarchy? This great country of ours is moving very rapidly in the direction of oligarchy.
And that was 2013, that last one. So, this is something that people like Bernie Sanders, with his finger on a pulse, for some, 30 years now, have been saying. Let's join Myers a little bit later to give us some indication as to the extent of the moneyed interests that have taken over the cloisters of power and are looking to take over the cloisters of power in the US.
Too loud. It's not your personality. It's because they know they'll profit off your presidency. They already are.
President-elect Donald Trump assembling now what could be the wealthiest administration in history.
The Trump cabinet will have more billionaires and centimillionaires than any in history. The billionaires on the official cabinet will have a combined net worth of over $13 billion.
The fortunes of the 10 richest people in the world surged by a daily record after Donald Trump won second term as president. According to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index, the net worth of billionaires led by Tesla's Elon Musk surged by $63.5 billion.
In fact, Bloomberg reports that Musk's net worth hit $400 billion. That's the first person ever to be that wealthy.
Imagine if we go back.
So this is a problem, right? That you don't need that much wealth. Okay, we could talk about wealth being held in the value of those companies. But still, people don't understand the difference between a billion and a million. What was it? I remember writing an article based on this meme that was going around that was fact check, and the maths was right, and it was something like, I said the maths is right, but I can't remember the figures. It's something like, if you go back to 1482 or whatever, and you were to have, was it $5,000 or $10,000 a day, something like that. Let's say $5,000 a day, and you have $5,000 a day from every day from 1482 to now, you still wouldn't have $1 billion. and you would still earn less than, at the time, it was Jeff Bezos was earning in a week. You're like, who needs that much money? You don't. So there is an issue where there is a polarization in inequality or equality, where, you know, the rich are getting stupendously richer and the poor are getting poorer. And so when you look at things like when you look at per capita GDP in the US, and you think, well, the average, you know, US is looking good. What a rich country. The issue is that can skew the idea that there's a huge proportion of people in the US that are living under the, you know, in poverty, because the per capita GDP is skewed by some insanely rich people having an incredible amount of money, or not GDP per capita, but wealth per capita, or income per capita. It's I think going to be it's going to become a greater and greater problem. But when you have these insanely rich people effectively running, well, not effectively, you know, running the country, literally they are in positions of running the country. And actually the president is a billionaire as well, and he broke the emoluments clause back in 2016 to 2020, where he was enriching himself through getting people to stay, like foreign dignitaries, to go and have meetings at Mar-a-Lago and Trump Tower, and then put them up in his rooms and then charge him 3 times extra for those rooms, and putting special service in his rooms and then charging the government. He was literally making money out of being a president, and he should have been done on the emoluments clause, let alone all the other things he's going to be done for. So it's really worrying that I think checks and balances are being removed from the government, and that you know, you are getting social media companies bowing the knee, and media companies. So Jeff Bezos paying him straight up $1 million for his inauguration, and then $40 million through this kind of ridiculous documentary scenario. And that's a Washington Post then compromised, and Amazon as well. Amazon as a media platform, Amazon Prime, etc., compromised. You're getting all these tech bros genuflecting to Trump that the checks and balances from a media point of view are being removed. And I think, you know, Jim Acosta talks to this really, really well in his opening remarks the other night.
I'll take a moment to talk about something President Biden said during his farewell address. He warned the free press is crumbling in this country. I would add that's only if we, the people, let that happen. Journalists exist to seek the truth, to tell people's stories, to lift up voices that may not be heard otherwise, to shine a light on injustice, and to hold the powerful accountable. We are not the enemy of the people. We are the defenders of the people. Walter Cronkite once said, freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy. I want to take a moment to show you something. A woman sent me this sign 8 years ago. She carried it here at a march in Washington. She wrote on the back of the sign, to me and the press here in D.C., you have our support. To Nora, wherever you are, right back at you. Reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta. I want to take a moment to talk about...
And I think it's hugely impressive and important that he said that, you know, just to remind people the importance. And I although we often denigrate mainstream media, you've heard me say this a number of times, you lose mainstream media and you lose local media, actually, investigative journalism. You lose the ability to hold local and national people to account. And if you are just going to say, as Elon Musk does, yay, let's get rid of mainstream media, they're just full of lies, etc., etc. You know, Twitter is the only true news source, and he talks about how Twitter is the biggest news source in the world. And I'm using a lot of Twitter here, partly because I'm actually looking at Twitter as well. But you've got to understand that the way I use it is to actually refer back a lot of times to mainstream media. You lose that core source, you lose the ability to hold people to account and to give a voice that is more often factually based than stuff that you can just trawl off of social media, because there are publishing regulations in place for actual legacy mainstream media companies. And Pete Buttigieg as well has talked to this idea too, as he leaves his position.
Terms of trust that will be needed for things to improve in this country.
Sorry, let's see if I can get that a little bit louder for you. Right, let's start that again.
Forms of trust that will be needed for things to improve in this country. At a time where polarization and division dominates our national life, you, who know what it means to be a living, breathing, walking symbol of what people in your diverse and sometimes divided community all share and have in common, you will be needed more than ever to build trust and common purpose. At a time with misinformation gaining as much authority as truth in the public square, you, who live with the most immediate and inescapable realities, hard facts about what is and isn't working, the simple reality of a hole in the road or a collapsing house that cannot be denied or obscured with bluster or falsehoods. You will be needed more than ever to help people stay in touch with reality, to remind people that there is indeed such a thing as fact and fiction, and the job of leaders includes helping people sort out which is which.
That smashing together fact and fiction, that confusion now, it's incredibly worrying. And, you know, it's unfortunately, it goes somewhere like Fox News, and you've got Jessica Tarlov, who's fighting an incredible battle there to have, you know, facticity win the day. But she's up against it, you know, Sean Hannity here pouring scorn on her, although tongue-in-cheek says that even Sean Hannity was impressed.
Insecure in small towns, big cities, and is the world more safe and secure?
Well, the crime rates are down. Yeah, well, I'm going to make the argument that the crime rates are down. I'm going to make the argument that now, once they started addressing the border crisis, which was ignored for the first 3 years, that you do have border crossings down substantially. It's getting up to 55, 60% down. We have better cooperation with Mexico about that, working with President Trump. Oh my gosh, it's the truth, though. Look at the numbers on it.
I love that she's like, oh my gosh, like really sarcastically going back to Sean Hannity, because it's just there's no accountability here given to the Republicans, and yet Fox will absolutely go hell for leather at the Democrats. And of course, MSNBC, you can argue, is vice versa to that. But we do need to hold our governments to account, and the things that are being put in place at the moment by Trump and will be put in place. And it's going to be fascinating to see the 100 or so executive orders that are smashed out on the 21st. I just get a sense that the Trump administration won't be held to account as much. We've got Donald Trump claiming and talking about bluster and lies. So the epic ceasefire. So this is the Israeli peace deal. This epic ceasefire, which was done under Biden. And it's worth knowing that the King of Qatar has just come out and said, well, this is the same peace deal that's been on the table for 13 months. Okay? So this isn't something that Trump's just come along and sorted out. This epic ceasefire agreement could only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as is signaled in the entire world, to the entire world, that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I'm thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. Whatever happens that's good in the Biden administration, Trump takes responsibility for it. When he was talking about stock market records happening, he'd say that's because they know I'm going to be in charge. And then whenever something bad happens in the Biden administration, that's because of Biden. This is cherry picking your way through reality. And so whenever something good happens in the Trump administration, that's not anyone else's fault or responsibility, or you shouldn't give plaudits to them. It will be all because of him. And when something bad happens, he'll be blaming the previous Biden administration. This is just, this happens all the time in politics, but Trump is an absolute, he absolutely relies on this tactic of cherry picking his way through data. He says, with this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure that Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. Because, of course, he did such a good job from 2016 to 2020, right? We will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of the ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of the great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have just achieved so much without even being in the White House. Oh, well done you. Like, how have you achieved all this? He doesn't explain how he's done it, just that something good's just happened. We did that. Yeah. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed, so they can secure more victories for the United States. This is absolutely incredible. Like, heads I win, tails you lose. This is what it is. Again, he says, well, in fact, do we go there? Yeah. So, for those who don't know, Joe Biden is president and he got the deal done, not Trump. This is really sad, says Ed Krasenstein. Trump says, we have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you. Taking responsibility for that again. And then this is really, really worrying. Okay. So Donald Trump then says, far too long we've relied on taxing our great people using the Internal Revenue Service. Through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It is time for that to change. This is going to be precursor for him, like lifting taxes on the US, right? So he's going to lift taxes on the rich in the US, and then he's going to tax imports. He's going to tariff foreign countries. But of course, as we know, as I've told you many times before, that is a tax on your own importers, on your own consumers. He still doesn't seem to understand this, or is willfully ignoring it. So I'm announcing it's time for a change. I'm announcing that I will create the External Revenue Service to collect our tariffs, duties, and all revenue that come from foreign sources. We will begin charging those who make money off us with trade, and they will start paying finally their fair share. January the 20th, 2025 will be the birth of the External Revenue Service, Make America Great Again. And of course, you're not taxing the other countries. You can't tax a foreign country. So what do? You tax the goods that they are exporting to you, so that you are importing. So who pays for those taxes? The importer. It comes in as more expensive goods because the importer has to pay a tariff to import those goods. So then the importer passes those costs on, or doesn't, and then either makes less profit themselves. So you're hitting the profits of your own country. So you're just moving tax from profits to tax in tariffs. So no change. Or they put prices up, and you are hitting you are basically taxing. So that tax you're taking from. So you're either taking that money from your importers, or you're essentially taking it from the end consumers. But you're not taking it from the person who built them. Now, the idea is that then generates motivation to build that stuff yourself. So you don't tax the widget coming in, you build your own widgets. But that's a long-term thing. That's like a 5-10 year process. But yeah, the idea that the External Revenue Service, this is all bluster. And then for those who are saying, you take Trump too literally, he's telling you, and the only other option, you say either he's going to do this, or you're telling me this is just bluster. And if this is just bluster, then why should I believe anything he says? Oh, well, you're lying. This is bluster, so I'm not going to believe you. In other words, we should just ignore him. Ignore anything he says. But then what about when he says he's going to remove all illegal immigrants? Do you want to believe that or not? Is he going to do that or not? Like, is that bluster? And now, how do you, Mr. Trump supporter, Mrs. Trump supporter, Ms. Trump supporter, Master Trump supporter, how do you differentiate fact from fiction? And that's what Pete Buttigieg was just talking about. We need a way of differentiating fact from fiction. Well, Trump supporters already go, well, that's bluster. That's just, rhetoric. Okay. How do you know when it is and when it isn't? We live in a world that's far too confusing. And the reality is that Trump is there to self-aggrandize and to line his own pockets and those of his friends. Like I said to you the other day, the Wall Street Journal reports that Republicans again are introducing bills to repeal Corporate Transparency Act. So like I said previously, you've got two buckets here. What you've got to ask yourself is which of these two buckets do each and every one of the actions of the incoming government, or any government really, which bucket do they fill? Is it the bucket that is promoting democracy, transparency, fighting corruption, getting moneyed elites out of governance, and having representation of the people in your government to work for your people? In a way that's going to grow the economy, but isn't looking to line the pockets of the people in charge, etc., etc. Or is any one of these actions to help give more power to an administration that wants to move towards autocracy or an oligarchy, so that power and wealth and money is kept amongst those moneyed individuals, that cabal of oligarchs, and the rich get richer while the poor don't necessarily shift, and there is more corruption, there's less transparency. Okay, so in this case, Republicans again are introducing bills to repeal Corporate Transparency Act. Is that fighting inflation? Is that making the country more transparent? No, it's literally the opposite. So that goes into that bucket there, the worst bucket. And someone asked me the other day, look, can you just go over trickle-down economics again? Because, you talked about it. So just very quickly, trickle-down economics is the idea that you make the rich richer by tax cuts. You say, we're going to do tax cuts, but we're not going to do tax cuts across the board. We're just going to tax cuts for the rich. And why this is really good, so they say, is that the rich are the wealth makers. And if you, so one way to understand this would be something like this, right? So, you give a tax cut, you give 2 billion quid to the rich people, and they then create jobs because they're the job creators, and they go and create all these. Thanks for giving me all that money. I'm going to use that to create jobs, and then those extra jobs give more people more money. Then they spend that money, and then you get an economic recovery. So the idea, or your economy grows. So the idea is that you should think about making the rich richer in order to make everyone richer. And that's the way, and that's trickle-down economy. Now, it has been fundamentally debunked. You look at the brownback tax in Kansas and other places around the world. It is not something that there is really any evidence that it works. It used to be called the horse and sparrow economics in the old Victorian times, where the idea that you feed oats to the horse, it'll eat the oats, and it goes through the horse, and then it craps out the manure, and then the sparrows come down and peck at the manure. The sparrows representing kind of like everyone down at the bottom, and they're eating the horse poo. But because that was more kind of like negative for the people at the bottom, it's trickle down economics now, and the idea is it's supposed to look something like the old wine glass is often used as an example. There are lots here, but some of these aren't so positive, because it is here. So it is an ideology that is soundly critiqued. So this is what we're told, how we're told it works, and you pour the wine in at the top and it trickles down all to the bottom. But in reality, it's like, that wine glass, they just get a bigger wine glass, and it doesn't really trickle down. And so you get this theory of trickle up economics. So trickle up versus trickle down. I've talked about trickle up economics being a much better theory, although there are criticisms on both, of course. That's life. There's no perfect theory of anything, it seems. But anyway, trickle up economics works on a principle that if you pay poor people money, they're generally going to spank it, which is evidently true. Like if you give £1,000 to someone who's living on a breadline, they won't go, I'm going to invest this in stocks and shares, or I'm going to go and put this in a bank and won't touch it. They'll be like, you give me £1,000. They go and spank it, right? And the idea is that if you want to stimulate the economy, that's what you do. You give poor people loads of money, and then they go and spend it invariably locally. And that money is kind of a money multiplier, and that £1,000 gets spent and spent again, so it multiplies around locally. And the idea that actually people complain about the welfare state, you shouldn't be paying these people, they're doing nothing, blah blah blah. But actually, what you're doing through welfare is stimulating the economy. Or you could do it through minimum wage, although the criticism against minimum wage from free marketeers is it then puts up the price of business, and and it might act to cool down the economy. So, there are different ways you can do this, but the idea is that rather than paying so the criticism paying rich people $2 billion, right, or a tax cut or whatever, if I went to Elon Musk and said, here's $1 million, literally, if I went to Elon Musk and said, here's $1 million, he'll go, not even going to touch the sides, whatever, thanks mate. And he'll go and put it in an offshore bank account. And so you'll never see that again. So if you're going to give tax cuts to the rich, the idea that it trickles down is really controversial, because it doesn't. It fritters off to international offshore bank accounts. And what about your poor person in your local community? Whereas if you took $1 million is a great example, because for a lot of people, $1 million is a load of money, but for a super rich person, meh. you go and give $1 million to a bunch of people down at the bottom, the wider, triangle or bunch of glasses of wine here. The idea is that will actually generate more money so that everyone, and that money will go to the rich people at the top because they own the businesses that money's being spent in. And so you trickle up economics is a much, healthier way of generating a better economy, but also by allowing people right up those different strata to get a bite of the apple there. And so when we go back to look at what Trump is looking at doing, he's looking at giving a tax cut again to extending this tax cut. So Trump's 2017 tax cuts delivered a cut for the richest 0.1% of Americans. That was 277 times larger than the one teachers and firefighters got, nearly doubling US billionaire wealth. Lawmakers must prevent a repeat in 2025. It's going to be repeated, it's going to be extended, and it will be even deeper, as according to Trump. So if Trump wants to cut the corporate tax cut the corporate tax rate to 15%, it would give the 5 largest banks $4.1 billion as a tax cut payout, 5 largest drug makers $3.1 billion, 5 largest oil companies $2.5 billion, 5 largest grocery stores $1.7 billion. All the people that are already making stupendous amount of cash are going to make even more cash. And where's that money going to go? Will that all be spent locally? No, a lot of it will go abroad. You give all of that money to poor people in the US. If you add it up, 4.1, 3.1, 2.5, 1.7 billion dollars, and you just paid all the poor people in the US, the economy would go like, thank you very much, because that'll all be spent. It'll all be spent and then multiplied around. Hardly any of that will be sent abroad, other than some people going, I'm going to go on holiday, right? But you get the point. Now, going back to this idea that you've got a huge number, or a relatively huge number, of people coming into the Trump administration who are billionaires, who appear to be wanting to, or one can assume would be wanting to line their own pockets and gain even greater wealth from that position, then, well, here, Trump's Treasury nominee, is this Scott Bessent, who's a billionaire, says extending Trump's tax cuts for the rich are, quote, the single most important economic issue and warns of economic calamity if we don't let them keep more of their money.
Single most important economic issue of the day. This is pass-fail. That if we do not fix these tax cuts, if we do not renew and extend, then we will be facing an economic calamity.
Why would you be facing an economic calamity? Like, those tax cuts are already in place, right? So don't fix what ain't broke. And if the economy's doing really well at the moment, you can make an argument for not putting them up or not putting them down. So some Democrats would like not to renew those tax cuts, and actually you'd have heavier tax back again for the richer. You can make an argument, don't do that either. The economy is doing really well at the moment, leave it. But he's saying there will be an economic calamity, but not providing any evidence whatsoever of that. So he is presenting in the hearing an argument that there will be an economic collapse if we don't renew the tax cuts, and the implication is to deepen them even further, that will line the pockets of the rich overwhelmingly, as we saw in 2017. Where the top 0.1% massively gained. He is advocating for trickle-down economics on the account that if you don't do that, it will be a calamity. No evidence. Now, remember what was actually promised. Ed Krusenstein here says, I'll post this weekly until January the 20th, 2026. Remember, Trump promised to cut American energy prices by 50% within 12 months of taking over. So today's energy prices are, and he lists the energy prices, so they need to be cut by 50%. This means Trump promises that he will essentially see the below prices on January the 20th, 2026. And I promise you that we will not see those prices in a year. Trump lied for your vote. I'll post this every week until January the 20th. And again, it's like, is he? But then people go, oh, he's just being. You shouldn't take him literally. He's just being bombastic. Well, don't say, like, I wouldn't go to Doris next door and say, next week I'm going to do your shopping for you. And she'd go, oh, thank you very much. And then, next week comes on. She's like, oh, you didn't do my shopping. I struggled to get out and about. It's like, it's just been bombastic. She shouldn't take me literally. Okay, well, why did you say I'm going to do your shopping then? Well, you know, why would you say that? Why would you come and tell me, make me feel good about that, and make me say, yeah, I like JP next door. I voted for you for neighbour of the week. I voted for you because of what you said. You were going to do my shopping, and now you're not doing my shopping. Yeah, well, at least I got the vote. Nah, don't take me literally. Don't cry wolf. Back to this issue about, well, we shouldn't believe anything he says. So then he gets into this, we have this issue of the economy that he was going to want to do a good job in curating, but everything he's got planned is going to arguably screw the economy. Tariffs on the EU, tariffs on Denmark, tariffs on Mexico, tariffs on China, tariffs on Canada, economic and military war with some of these countries, including allies, buying Greenland, right? Is that going to lower the prices if you're spending money, if you're making things go up with inflation? And then, of course, getting rid of 15 million people. Now, this isn't a comment on immigration. I say, okay, if you want immigration, cool, go for it and do those things. Just understand that it will affect the economy. So you can't say you were going to lower your prices by 50%. You were going to have deflation, is actually what he claimed variously, and then do all these things to cause inflation. So either Trump screws the economy or he screws MAGA, says Richard Bidikofer, the election whisperer. He can't deliver both things. So getting Tomi Lahren, who is super right-wing, getting a little concerned, the message has morphed too. And if she's saying this, there's a problem. Quote, if you come here illegally, you won't be deported so long as you don't get caught committing more crimes. No, that's not what we voted for. The millions of illegals Biden let in will still bankrupt our communities regardless if they commit more crimes or not. And you've got this idea like, okay, but you need to be going further than just illegal immigrants. You need to be getting rid of all of these immigrants, and then you need to be, as some people are expecting, changing the legality of certain migrants so that you can get rid of them as well. Yeah, okay, fair enough. If that's what you want to happen, that will screw the economy. You can't do both. You can't keep the economy going really well and get rid of 15 million people. And if he's only going to get rid of a few people because he wants to protect the economy, then that will screw over MAGA, which is exactly what Bidikofer here says. And talking about, sorting your own people out, people often have been critical of Biden for protecting his own son, Hunter Biden, and pardoning him, even though, what he pardoned him for was a very minor thing that even, Matt Gaetz had done similar things, right? Matt Gaetz has a gun and has also, as we know from the Ethics Committee report, has been doing loads of drugs, and no one was like, oh my goodness, no one took him to court for having a gun license, etc., etc. So there were loads of double standards going on. Anyway, this is an interesting exchange from a guy from the Shark Tank who's a massive Trump supporter.
That's going to be the case. How do you think history's going to treat his foreign policy, his Bidenomics? How do you think he's going to be treated? Pardoning his son, the Biden brand name. Do you think a single Biden can get on the board of the Smithsonian?
I don't think you can argue against pardoning the son when you supported a felon. You see, that to me, you lose the moral authority there.
How do you feel about the Biden brand? How did he help his family? It's worse than Nixon for him.
You're going to talk to me about helping the family when Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis?
Yeah.
That's a mic drop moment. Although this is hypocrisy, she's pointing out hypocrisy of O'Leary and the Trump family, or the Trump administration, or Donald Trump. This is actually the two cockcrow fallacy, which is, I've got criticism of Biden, and by saying, well, Trump's done it too, doesn't actually excuse Biden doing it, by the way. So just note that I am aware that this is a slightly fallacious argument from a technical, logical point of view. But it's absolutely right to point out the hypocrisy of someone. Hey, hang on, why are you, the double standards of someone like O'Leary here, who is not having a go at Trump, and lining his monuments calls like I was talking about before, but then Jared Kushner suddenly getting $2 billion from the Saudis that at the time was known to be a bad investment. So everyone was like, well, why are they investing that in him? And it's quid pro quo. And it's like, so you don't come to me and talk about nepotism when you've got, corruption, I think, going on in the Trump family as a result of Trump's administration previously. Right, then we get onto this inauguration. I'm just going to mention this very quickly because it's just amuses me a little bit. So Trump has been talking about massive, if you remember, old Sean Spicer, wasn't it, with the claiming that the inauguration crowds in 2016 were like the biggest the world had ever seen, and then the photos came out and they're like, no, not that big, and he's like, yes they were, blah blah blah, and it was all quite embarrassing. And ever since then, Trump has been massive on crowds. At the rallies, his crowds have to be bigger than everyone else's. Anyway, he's just cancelled the inauguration being taking place outside. Now, I can understand this because it's going to be very, very cold, right? Super cold. And I understand he's saying we want to protect the armed force, the law, the policemen and law enforcement in the area. We want to look after them. It's like January the 6th last time. Were you looking after law enforcement? I don't know if you were. Anyway, forget January the 6th last time around. So he's cancelling this, but and saying that it's going to be too cold, so we're going to hold it indoors. But there are loads of rumours that actually they hadn't sold enough tickets, that there were not going to be big crowds. So loads of people talking about how this is just that he didn't want to be embarrassed by having a small crowd. And then people like Tim Wolves coming out and trolling, saying there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. You've got people talking about Greenland. Are you sure you want Greenland? Trump inauguration to be moved indoors due to the cold. What about Greenland? And then the people who want to forcibly take over Canada are moving an event indoors because it's -6 degrees Celsius. That's obviously not Fahrenheit. Outside, lol, LMAO even. Donald Trump swearing in will be moved indoors to the Capitol Rotunda because of forecasted frigid temperatures. And then there are loads of people now tweeting today who have spent an awful lot of money going to Trump's inauguration. So I've seen many tweets like this today from Trump supporters who spent thousands of dollars to attend the inauguration. Some are already in DC. Trump's inaugural committee already reportedly raked in over $250 million. And of course, there's no transparency as to how he got that money, who gave him that money. He could easily reimburse them because he's just been paid $250 million for what? I don't know. He could easily reimburse these people, but we all know he won't because he doesn't give a damn about his supporters. So lots of people saying stuff like this. Yeah, I'm annoyed. I paid $5,000 for this. I was there at January the 6th, J6. It was a heartbreaking day. That's why I paid so much to come back for our redemption. I want Trump safe at all costs, but I would be lying if I said I'm not disappointed to see him sworn in. My man and I spent thousands of dollars to be here, and now we're just walking around lost. But so there you go. Now, Kevin O'Leary, then, we're going to hear from him again, spouting off about Michelle Obama not going to the inauguration.
She's a really nice woman, and Obama, nice guy. However, this is different. This is about signaling the office of the President of the United States, regardless of who's in it. This tradition has gone on for over 100 years. This is what presidents do and their wives on Inauguration Day. This is the holiest day of politics. It is the transition of power. You have to respect it. I don't like what she's doing here. I'm against it. I think it's wrong.
And you've had a bunch of Republicans, bunch of Fox News anchors talking about this. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling because I'm pretty sure that Trump and Melania Trump did not go to the inauguration for Joe Biden. As Brian Krasenstein again says, Kevin O'Leary on Michelle Obama missing the inauguration. This tradition's gone on for over 100 years, blah, blah, blah. Anyone tell him about the tradition ending 4 years ago? Absolutely ridiculous that these people are saying how absolutely heinous it is that she's not doing that. Just give over. And then this is all on the back of Jack Smith's. So we know that Jack Smith, special counselor, was not really permitted to carry on. Well, he wouldn't have been. He closed up his investigations into Trump and J6, and this was seen by Republicans as, because there wasn't anything in it, etc., etc. But of course, he did that because it was too slow. I mean, I blame Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, who is probably the reason you see Trump as president now. If Merrick Garland had got off his arse and done things more quickly, or done things quicker, then Trump would probably be heading to jail now. But alas, no, because things like the J6 and the documents one, which I think was a real shoe-in, would have completed, and he'd be in trouble. So anyway, the J6, so Donald Trump would have been convicted over the 2020 election, says special counsel Jack Smith.
Washington Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on his investigation into Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election was released to the public overnight after an 11th-hour legal challenge by the president-elect failed. The report summarizes Smith's investigation into Trump's efforts to maintain power. It states in no uncertain terms that Smith's team believed Trump criminally attempted to subvert the will of the American people and overturn the 2020 election results for the election he lost. That, of course, culminated in the deadly January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The report states that Trump spread claims that were, quote, demonstrably and in many cases obviously false, and that Trump inspired his supporters to commit acts of physical violence. Smith concludes that if it wasn't for Trump's election in November that prevented the prosecution from moving forward, quote, the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. Washington Special.
And there you go. So that is pretty damning indictment of Donald Trump there. There it is. Trump would have been convicted of conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to deprive citizens of voting rights if he had not been elected to be president. So the only reason this was dropped is because he got elected and they didn't want to continue this with an elected president. So absolutely incredible stuff there. Now, moving on, so much to go through. Talking about upholding the Constitution. So this is going to be a long video. But talking about upholding the Constitution and the idea that January the 6th really wasn't doing that. Here's an example of someone that has sought to do this. Now, farewell remarks by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin have been delivered, and there are some lovely sentiments in here. Really well-crafted speech. Part of it further down the speech. So, ladies and gentlemen, the power of the United States military flows from both our people and our principles. Our capabilities are unrivaled, our platforms are unmatched, but those are expressions of our strength, not its foundation. Every military defends a country, but the United States military also defends a constitution. Now, this isn't some side point. It's the oath that I swore when I commissioned to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Right, what Lloyd Austin is being very pointed here, because you are seeing people in the hearings at the moment that are being asked whether they would break the law. You've had Pete Hegseth, you've had I think there's Christine Noem being asked about this. Pam Bondi was asked about this. You know, would you break the law for Donald Trump? Are you loyal to the dear leader or the Constitution? And they are opting for the leader. Lloyd Austin is making a very pointed remark here, and especially in quoting that he was commissioned to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He said, that is what we do. That is who we are, and I will never stop saying this. We defend not just the American people, but also the American idea. We are not just any military, we're the United States military. We defend government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we do not bend on matters of honor, integrity, or law. You know, I was, again, I think pointed to Pete Hegseth, who was talking about lethality was more important than legality, or wanted some compromise between the two. You know, I was taught at West Point to pray that I would, quote, choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And I've tried every day as secretary to live up to that teaching. I know that I may sound old-fashioned, but when it comes to flag, country, and constitution, I am an old-fashioned guy. Ladies and gentlemen, I leave the Department of Defense with great pride and great confidence, and that's because of you, because of your courage, your character, your strength, your integrity, and your commitment to excellence, and your refusal to accept honor, dishonor, or defeat. You know, there's a great tension, even a paradox at the heart of our enterprise. Those of us who spend our lives trying to master war are also the ones who best understand its terrors. If we must use military force to defend our country, we will not flinch and we will not fail, but we have learned in the hardest possible way that we should be modest about what force can achieve and be wary of its unexpected consequences. Now, we understand that this mighty department is just one of our tools of national power, and it's been my duty to keep our country from returning to those terrible times of great power war. to the dangerous decades when America abandoned its position of global leadership and came to believe that we could stand alone and apart while freedom itself was in mortal danger. Over the past 5 decades, I've seen the United States military change profoundly. We've gone from the limping and demoralized conscript force of Vietnam to the lethal powerhouse of today's all-volunteer force. It goes on to say later, the world continues to look to America and we must stand as a beacon of freedom. We are not just any country, we are the guardians of the revolutionary ideals of our founders. They believe that governments exist to serve their people and not the other way round. They believe that all human beings are created equal. They believe that we are all endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. They believe that tyrants and kings have had their day, and they believed in the final reckoning, power belongs to the people. There's no coincidence that he's saying this, right? This is a pointed comment about Trump and the, I think, autocratic tendencies of the incoming administration that look more like tyrants and kings, or he looks more like a tyrant and king than someone who is wanting to rule for the people, as a reflection of the people. You know, those beliefs still inspire the world and they still spur us on. As I said, last year in Normandy, 80 years after D-Day, we still seek a world where aggression is a sin, where human rights are sacred, and where all people can live in freedom. So the question is, are all the things that the Trump administration, all the things they're going to do, are they going to promote freedom, promote human rights? And are they going to show the US is a beacon of freedom or not? I don't know. Interesting that Lloyd Austin himself was then given a righteous send-off here. So it gives you a sense of who he is, who he was as that leader. And then, you know, you look at, going back to what I talked about with Pete Hegseth, is he that kind of guy? Is Pete Hegseth going to be received in that way at the end of his, or sent off in that way at the end of his tenure? The GOP Senator Joni Ernst announced she will vote to confirm Pete Hegseth, and she was the one who herself was a victim of sexual assault, and Pete Hegseth is someone who has been accused of being that person, someone who has committed some kind of sexual misdemeanor, that he is also against women in combat roles and so on and so forth. So if Joni Ernst has turned around and said that she will endorse him, then there's going to be no problem with him getting through with the rest of the Republicans, as this source says, another sellout here. So what happened in that time where she just did that switcheroo? How much pressure was put on her? When it comes to Pete Hegseth, it's interesting. This is someone who is a former is a veteran former sniper, I think, who is a scholar and gentleman, pro-democracy, anti-fascism. Trump is a convicted felon and rapist who is constitutionally disqualified from office. Yeah, so AF, says Andrew. So there's a lot of swearing in this. But the interesting point is about Pete Hegseth, because some people said he is qualified. Listen to what he said. And I was saying that he said he can put 30 rounds, you know, he knows how many rounds go in a magazine to this gun, and he knows he can do 20 press ups and blah, blah, blah. And so what? What's that got to do with being in the role of Secretary of Defense? And excuse the swearing here, but this is really well described.
Here are my thoughts. He is the most unqualified candidate I've ever seen in my fucking life, and everybody knows it. Literally everybody who watched that hearing knows it. You know it, I know it, they know it. What the fuck? The guy was a major in the National Guard. And for
Oh, by the way, the guy that's speaking isn't that guy, Andrew. I just told you, actually. This guy is not the guy. So this is the sniper. He is not that Andrew, that YouTube channel that I just described. So please don't think that's the same person.
You civilians, I know you don't understand. That's called an 04. The military rank structure for officers is 01 through 010. Pete's an 04. So what does that mean? Well, in comparison, General Mattis, the guy I interviewed, he was an O10, a fucking O10. There is a huge knowledge and experience difference between an O4 and an O10. Every time you get promoted when you're an officer, you get a larger budget and more responsibility. And you have required reading about military tactics, psychology and war, about global politics, about everything, all the way up to O10. You have to read.
You have to, so it goes on and on. You know, you have to read all these books. You have to go to Command and General Staff College and War College, blah, blah, blah. So when people are saying, oh, he's a veteran, of course he's qualified for that job. No, he's not remote. And he goes on for another 2 minutes saying he is not remotely qualified to do the job of Secretary of Defense. He has not done the reading. He's not got the requisite knowledge. He's not got the experience of controlling those budgets, of being in charge of that many people, any more than 100 people. I think he's never been in charge of. So what is going on? And then you get, so why am I talking again about Pete Hegseth? Well, it's this idea that you're moving towards autocracy, where you have to bend your knee to the leader, and everything the leader wants is what you get. You've got Charlie Kirk here in charge of Turning Point USA, saying if anyone in the Senate GOP votes against confirming Pete Hegseth after his stellar performance today, there will be a primary challenge waiting for you. You can take that to the bank. So when Joni Ernst has done her switcheroo, and you're like, I wonder why she did that, because she's been threatened. We've had Elon Musk saying that he will pay for the primary challenge of anyone that doesn't vote for these people. So, Carlos Turnbull says, if you have to start threatening senators from your own party to confirm a cabinet nominee, then perhaps that nominee isn't the best candidate. So one, you're not going to be getting in the best people. Two, this is looking like a dictatorship. This is deeply, deeply worrying. So that wasn't a test of Pete Hegseth, as David Pepper here says. He's already failed, wholly unfit. It's a test of the US Senate and the checks and balances. So we talked earlier about the checks and balances being eroded, the freedom of the press being compromised, media sites being compromised, and the press being called the enemy of the people by Trump. And then you have senators being threatened and having to toe the party line. They are the checks and balances, and they are being removed. Now, then you have Kristi Noem here going for the DHS. I think Senator Blumenthal.
I assume you will agree with me that withholding disaster relief by President Trump or any other chief executive of the United States is a violation of his duty and of law.
Well, Senator, leadership has consequences. And looking at the tragedy that's happening in California,
I want to ask you yes or no, with all due respect.
Yeah.
I don't think she answered that. And the idea is there that it's okay to withhold money to a disaster money to a state that is run by the other party, and then we are just getting into hamstringing the other party, and then putting obstacles in the way of them getting elected again, and this looks more and more like dictatorship and autocracy. Stuff like this that you've got to worry about. Don't just dismiss this. Don't dismiss stuff like, oh, we should have conditional aid to California. The Democrats didn't do this. This is only something the Republicans are doing, and this is really, really worrying. Okay, what other issues do we have? Now we're going to get on to tech. So between the AI garbage filling your feed and this, says Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat, I don't understand why anyone would still use Facebook. So Meta has quietly dismantled the system that prevented misinformation from spreading in the United States. So this goes back to both Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden talking about disinformation and misinformation. Machine learning classifiers that once identified viral hoaxes and limited their reach have now been switched off. Platformer has learned. So Platformer, okay, behind the scenes, the company was also, this is Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, has also quietly been dismantling a system to prevent the spread of disinformation. When the company announced on January the 7th that it would end its fact-checking partnerships, the company also instructed teams responsible for ranking content in the company's apps to stop penalizing misinformation, according to sources and an internal document obtained by Platformer. The result is the sort of viral hoaxes that ran roughshod over the platform during the 2016 presidential election. Pope Francis endorses Trump, Pizzagate, and all the rest are now just as eligible for free amplification on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads as true stories. And we already know that false news travels 6 times faster than truth on Facebook. Like I can show you papers that have been investigating that. I used to research for one of my books. This is deeply, deeply worrying. We are moving into an era of disinformation where all the checks and balances are being taken away from a government to stop it from becoming autocratic. So that's going to happen. But also media companies are having the checks and balances being taken away from them, or they are voluntarily doing that in order to bend the knee to Trump and to become more Muskified, to become more Xified. And then we move on to TikTok. Right, so ByteDance and its Chinese communist masters had 9 months to sell TikTok before the Sunday deadline, says Tom Cotton. So Tom Cotton is a Republican senator, right, of Arkansas. So he, rightfully, you could argue, is slagging off TikTok. The very fact that communist China refuses to permit its sale reveals exactly what TikTok is, a communist spy app. The Supreme Court correctly rejected TikTok's lies and propaganda masquerading as legal arguments, said Tom Cotton on the 17th of January. Now, we can argue whether he's correct. There's some interesting arguments to state that if you are going to single out TikTok, you are having double standards because all of the social media companies are doing exactly the same thing. So why just single out TikTok? And then, of course, the Chinese connections and so on and so forth. But there are arguments against banning TikTok. But let's just put that to the side for the moment. Ukraine Battlemap says the less influence China has, the better. China and Chinese-owned TikTok are complaining about TikTok being banned in the US, saying it limits free speech. Meanwhile, China has banned Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Reddit, and X. Oh, and TikTok. So all of those can't be seen in China, yet everyone's complaining that China is going to have its TikTok banned in the US. And you're like, there's some double standards going on here. Well, let's go back in time a little bit. The effort to ban TikTok was started by Trump in 2020. Let's have a look at all of these. Donald Trump declares war on TikTok from Air Force One. Trump says he'll ban TikTok in the US. President Trump says he'll ban TikTok from the US. Blah, 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 blah. All of those newspaper articles. Okay, he was going to do that. Which is, I mean, it's always interesting banning stuff. MAGA logic, says Kasim Rashid. TikTok, ban it. Abortion, ban it. Marijuana, ban it. Drag shows, ban it. Immigration, ban it. Public schools, ban it. Dialogue on racism, ban it. Books by black or LGBTQ authors, ban it. Guns, bans don't work, you snowflakes. Don't ban them. Okay, so we can have guns, but everything else we need to ban. Okay, got it. Anyway, that aside. So Donald Trump, who signed a ban on TikTok as president due to Chinese ownership, now opposes the law.
Make a decision. I will make a decision. I must say, I was on TikTok for the election, and I won the young people by 36 points. No Republicans ever won the young people, and I won by, you saw that, one of the best groups. I won by 36 points. I was on TikTok. I had TikTok Jack working for me. He was a young guy, 21 years old. He was great.
So basically Trump's saying, I don't want to ban TikTok now. Nothing to do with Chinese influence or the Chinese having your data. I don't want to ban it because I did well on TikTok and it handed me the election.
And we won young people. We won just sort of about everything, but we won young people. And I think that's a big, a big credit to TikTok. So I'm not opposed to TikTok. I think, let's see what happens. I really have to wait to see what happens at the Supreme Court because nobody knows what they can do and who's going to do it until they hear from the Supreme Court. They're going to be making a ruling pretty soon.
Okay, interesting stuff.
But I had a very good experience with TikTok.
So Trump won 46% of the young people. He didn't win it by 36%. He won 46%, so less than half. So he's also lying to you. It's up from 36% in 2020. So he might have made that error, but he's lying to you anyway. But his rationale for keeping TikTok is because it helped him win the election. Now, get a load of this. So then we have also heard that a guy that was 15% has a 15% stake in ByteDance that owns TikTok gave the Republicans $100 million basically in the run up to the election, including Trump, and actually met with Trump. And this is when Trump changed his mind on TikTok. So just to let you know that you can buy Trump, you can buy America. If you give enough money, then you can get policies changed. So now do we understand why Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook from Apple, Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, Jeff Bezos from Amazon and the Washington Post, Elon Musk, OpenAI guy, etc., Coca-Cola have gone in and given him a special presidential Diet Coke. All of these people, and Coca-Cola made a massively robust statement about January the 6th and about how disgraceful that was. And yet 4 years later, they're cozying up to Trump. You can buy Trump, and they are lining up to do so. This is an oligarchy. So the TikTok CEO is attending Trump's inauguration as the app's fate hangs in a balance. He's going to have a front row seat at the inauguration. This is absolutely staggering. Then we also hear that Elon Musk might buy, because what they were going to have to do is sell off TikTok to an American concern, essentially. So you're kind of, the Chinese are divesting it to the US. And Elon Musk was going to buy that. And that option, I don't know if it's still on the table at all, whether it's too late now to buy it. But imagine him owning TikTok and Twitter. Insanely dangerous. And basically, move towards monopoly. Adam Kinzinger is saying it's very easy. Trump is in China's control, and people like Mike Walsh would prefer access to power over standing up to it. Jim Sciutto says senators say they are baffled by the announcement that TikTok's CEO will be attending President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration next week. I don't get it, says Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat in the Senate Intelligence Committee, noting that Trump had raised concerns with Chinese government influence on TikTok. 80% of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, agreed that TikTok is a huge national security concern. I can't think of potentially more powerful propaganda tool, he said. It's absolutely incredible that if you've got 80% of Congress agreed that TikTok should be banned, that you've got the CEO of TikTok now front row seat at the inauguration. And what's more, Trump has been on the phone to Xi Jinping. Trump has never been and is not tough on China. It was all rhetoric during the election season. He admires dictators and likes to curry favour with them and doesn't give a damn about CCP's massive human rights abuses. Donald Trump said, I just spoke with Chairman Xi Jinping of China. The call was a very good one for both China and the USA. It's my expectation that we'll solve many problems together, starting immediately. We discussed balancing trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and many other subjects. President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe. It makes you wonder whether he will just capitulate to the Chinese demands there, because that's what he seems to do to strong men. So Mehdi Hassan says, so why does your beloved Trump have the CEO of TikTok on stage at his inauguration as a VIP guest? Will you say a word about that? So this goes back to Tim Cotton. So the reason I showed you Tim Cotton in the beginning is that he was really strong about this. Communist China owned TikTok, and saying here, TikTok is a spy app used by the Chinese Communist Party to steal data and push propaganda. Okay, Tom Cotton, what do you now say about the TikTok CEO being front seat? And
to get away from it.
I think it's worth listening to here Scott Galloway, who is a bit of a tech businessman, or a businessman who's involved. I think he does a podcast with Kara Swisher, you saw just there, casting his opinion. We just listen to a little bit of it.
Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business, also host of the Raging Moderates podcast, and as I mentioned, co-host of Pivot.
It's Pivot with Kara Swisher.
Scott, Kara Swisher obviously feels very strongly about Mark Zuckerberg there. When you heard that Elon Musk, well, it must make sense, but Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, other tech leaders are seated on the dais at the inauguration, did that surprise you at all, given what we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
I would describe it as shocking, not surprising, when the same people who gave zero to the inauguration committee for Biden, who have so far, as I know, given zero to the Wildfire Relief Fund, all give $1 million to the Trump inaugural committee and go up there to sort of bend a knee. We've gone feels like we've gone full oligarch. It's kind of disappointing because I just don't think these individuals necessarily support his policies, but you could argue most generously they're being good fiduciaries for their shareholders, recognizing that if they compliment and support the president and give him and his inaugural committee money, they're going to see a return on that. But that's basically an oligarchy. So I think it's
there you go,
shocking,
like we've been saying,
but not surprising.
And you think money is at the root of it for Zuckerberg? I mean, he's got plenty of money.
Everything, as far as I can tell, you always bet on the money thing. It's, I mean, a lot of us would do that for a lot less, but what's the point of having all this money if you're not going to stand up for principles? The most generous thing you can say about Mark Zuckerberg right now is that he's being a pragmatic billionaire and totally focused on shareholder value, as are, to be fair, Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook. But at some point, what's the point of having all this money if you can't stand up for traditional American values? Or quite frankly, just stick up the middle finger to someone who's trying to intimidate you or threatened to put you in prison.
TikTok is also hosting an event during the inaugural festivities to celebrate influencers who campaigned for Trump. I know, obviously, the app CEO is also expected to attend the inauguration. They're set to be banned in the coming days by U.S. law. Though now there's a scramble from both parties to extend the deadline, possibly stop the ban altogether. What do you read into the CEO being there? Is that's also, I guess, purely transactional?
Jeffrey Ask gave, I think, $100 million to the GOP Senate campaign, and all of a sudden he's one of the largest investors and owners, American owners in TikTok, and all of a sudden we're reconsidering a law that was passed by 80 senators. And in the great serious succession, Logan Roy says in a negotiation with his children, "You are not serious people." Are we a serious country when the president signs a ban against a foreign adversary and then on the eve of the ban, we blink? What happens the next time we're negotiating a trade agreement or trying to negotiate them not invading Taiwan? Are we a serious people? We're blinking. We're scrambling. They called our bluff.
I'm wondering what you thought when you heard Biden talk of a looming threat from a tech industrial complex.
Thought it was really appreciated. It reminded me of Eisenhower's warning of an emerging military industrial complex. There's too much power in too few hands. And we have a technology sector that is the most powerful people, the most powerful companies with almost no regulation. And as you know, Anderson, I think a lot about young men. We have the deepest pocketed, most well-resourced companies in the world, all trying to convince young men they can have a reasonable facsimile of life online with an algorithm. I have a 14-year-old son. TikTok, the average 14-year-old is spending 17 hours a week on TikTok.
It's terrifying.
I mean, it is a real threat. And social media, which has no regulation, continues, in my opinion, to increase teen depression, teen anxiety, and we're just watching it all happen. When we look back on this era, we'll regret income inequality, we'll regret the concentration of power, the weaponization of our elections, but the things you and I are going to regret, unfortunately, I think this will be figured out because your kids are so young, but the thing my generation will regret is how did we let this happen to our children?
Boom. Boom. So here's a case against TikTok just out on the screen for you in Weiss SCOTUS. The Supreme Court actually ruled against TikTok. So there's a last minute appeal and the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 against it. And on the screen there, you can pause that and see why they did so. Now, just as a little sidebar here, Elon Musk. So the news here, and this is coming from Mario Norfolk, Chinese hackers have breached US Treasury computers, right? So this should be an opportunity for people to go, oh my goodness, the Chinese are bad guys here. This is crazy. We need to do something about this. Notice that Elon Musk's response to this isn't to attack the Chinese. He never attacks the Chinese because he's compromised by China. Who does he attack in hearing that Treasury computers have been hacked? Elon Musk says a 12-year-old script kiddie could hack into Janet Yellen's, head of the Treasury, computer. I doubt she knows how to reboot her Wi-Fi router. Wow. That's who he chooses to attack. Not the Chinese for hacking. No, let's attack the victim and let's attack Janet Yellen. So China is infiltrating, arguably, US tech domain. And because they're paying money to the Republicans, they get to do that. And Republicans sort of do an about face, or Tom Cotton in that case, doesn't appear to say anything. Now, talking of Twitter, major development, the German Ministry of Defense has stopped posting on Twitter. Following an evaluation, they established that factual exchanges of views have become too difficult on Twitter, or X. The account will run passively for now, reserving the right to post in case of major disinformation. And also, and this is because AFD there was advocacy for the AFD by Elon Musk, and he interviewed Alice Weidel. Another major departure from X. To date, the German MOD, the German Armed Forces, a large collective of German universities, and now the Bundesbank have suspended their X accounts. And by the way, French institutions are also leaving. Yesterday, the city of Paris announced it was leaving X. Today, a major regional newspaper, Le Devoir du Nord, also announced its departure, joining the ranks of Ouest France, Sud-Ouest, and Mediapart, all sizable French media organizations. You might start getting a reaction, or you might just get this huge polarization continuing. Now, so the question is, as your man there just said, Scott Galloway, there's no regulation for these social media companies. There is in Europe, the EU, and this is why, people like to hate the EU from America because of the way the EU tries to regulate to stop moral infractions taking place. Well, now Brussels has ordered Twitter, or X, to hand over documentation on its algorithm. This is absolutely fascinating. So today we are taking further steps to shed light on the compliance of X's recommended systems with the obligations under the DSA, the EU Digital Commissioner Henna Virkkunen said in a statement. The Commission played down reports this week that it was reviewing its investigations against big tech companies, stressing that they were continuing as normal and Trump's return to the White House did not affect its commitment to enforcing its laws. Virkkunen implied that the EU would not hesitate to use its powers. It had to ban or fine X if it was found to be in breach of the DSA. Quote, "We are committed to ensuring that every platform operating in the EU respects our legislation, which aims to make the online environment fair, safe and democratic for all European citizens." As well as a request for information on X's recommended systems and any recent changes by 15th of February, the three-pronged investigation has also issued a retention order obliging the platform to preserve internal documents and information regarding future changes in the design and functioning of the recommended algorithm between the 17th and 30th of January and 31st of December, unless the Commission's investigation concludes before the end of the year. And then also other things as well they've asked for. So this is good news as far as I'm concerned. I think Twitter needs to be sorted out, personally. And, it's really frustrating when you look at someone like Elon Musk that has received all these payouts from taxpayers in the US in terms of subsidies. And then, you saw his space, whatever it was, module, whatever it was, that blew up the other night. And all the space debris came down. It looked fairly spectacular, but it was a bit of a disaster. The American taxpayer gave this douche more than $20 billion to blow shit up and laugh. If NASA's vehicles failed at the rate SpaceX vehicles did, there would be congressional hearings. The agency would be dissolved or severely reformed. And since Trump will put a Musk simp in charge of NASA, expect more billions to go boom for his ego, while the Artemis program, a vehicle that actually works and can get people to the moon, will be further delayed. Also, did you know that SpaceX fanboys threaten and dox NASA engineers working on Artemis? Musk is a cancer on politics, science and taxpayers' money. So Elon Musk replies to this video, success is uncertain, but entertainment is guaranteed. Oh, it's entertaining. You get to see nice things blowing up. Well, that's good. That's good for the American taxpayer. And talking about tech people, you've had Bill Gates even having a meeting, a 3-hour meal at Mar-a-Lago with, I think, Donald Trump and Susie Wiles. And he said he was impressed with Trump over some such stuff. He's big into vaccines and malaria and COVID and HIV, and yet Trump was arguably the one who's led to many deaths as a result of COVID. Anyway, people are now thinking, really, is Bill Gates to be added to this oligarchy? This is highly controversial. Another billionaire chooses Trump. I don't know if that is a bit of an overstatement of where Bill Gates probably sits, and I would think that he's the kind of I'm impressed was because I read some of the a bit more of an article talking about his responses, and I think you can read it either way there. So I don't think he's doing a Mark Zuckerberg and he's going to be giving millions of dollars to Trump's inauguration, but he's certainly turning up to Mar-a-Lago. And I love this. Can a headline alone be eligible for a Pulitzer Prize? This is from The Guardian Australia saying, I knew one day I'd have to watch powerful men burn the world down. I just didn't expect them to be such losers. The picture of Mark Zuckerberg with some big glasses on. I love that. Just absolutely great there. And then just in terms of tech and lying, there are some really good analyses of Elon Musk in this kind of new Gamergate situation where he's been lying. He's been saying he's number one on a particular game, Path to Exile 2, and also Diablo leaderboard. And actually, he's then done live streams of him playing it, and he doesn't really know what he's doing, and he does things very differently. So you watch some analyses of this. Elon Musk is being absolutely ripped apart by the people that were previously supporting him, big gamer people, males of a certain age, blah, blah, blah. Some really interesting analyses. And he's then taken one guy who was a pretty horrible gamer guy, I think, Asmonon or someone like that, who called out Musk a little bit. And then Musk took away his check. So this is a guy who says he's a free speech absolutist, took away his check, then produced a bunch of DMs, published a bunch of DMs from like private messages from this guy, and then trashed him in public while taking away his voice. And people have reacted to that because it turns out that Musk didn't really understand what this guy. He was saying, he's answering to his editors as if this guy was being controlled by editors, but didn't understand that YouTubers have editors, people that help them edit videos to put videos up. And that's what Asmonon or whatever his name is said. Then my editors, I went to my editors to blah, blah, blah. And anyway, Elon Musk came out and slagged him off for being answerable to this upper echelon of people thinking of newspaper editors. And it's like, no, it's my video editors, mates that end up editing my videos while I just go on and record them, etc., etc. Anyway, I'm going to just play this out. This will be the end of the video, pretty much. This is sums up Elon Musk to a T, which is this guy, and this has had almost 5 million views. This video. This is a big guy online that does stuff like this.
That can be pushed. Come on. He's talking about editors and then saying Asmon needs his editor's permission to post things. He lacks the fundamental understanding not only of Path of Exile 2, but of life. Like of living as a sentient being. How can you even reach that conclusion? I mean, I know how he reached that conclusion because he is a turbo moron who can't activate neurons and think. So he saw the word editor and made the assumption that it's like the editors that will oversee someone's work in the journalism sector. And he gets these dots, these breadcrumbs that he starts connecting from out of fucking nowhere about how, well, Asmon is actually just a pawn of his editors. That's not just wrong, that is just blatant misinformation. He is actively engaging in misinformation, making it seem like Asmon has a puppet master above him, these editors, that he has to answer to. And then he abuses his power to take away his checkmark. He is actively doing all of the things he says he is super against, and all of the people say that he hates and will never do. He does it. I don't see how a single Elon Musk nipple-suckling leech could see this and conjure up some kind of excuse for it. There's no mental gymnastics that could...
So just to remind people what happened, he's claimed he's at the top of his leaderboard. It's been shown to be physically impossible to be up there. It would take, for those games, like someone was saying, in order to do what he said he had done in the last 48 hours, he'd have to spend 40 hours playing that non-stop. And yet he's a CEO of 3 companies. He's doing this, blah, 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 blah. So he has people playing for him. Then he goes and does his live streams where he shows he can't really play the game very well and doesn't do some of the basics. I've seen some of the analysis of this, very geeky. They're like, well, you wouldn't take that from there. If you've been playing this for like 200 hours plus, no, or more than that, you wouldn't be doing that. You can't be doing, no, that's not what you do, blah, blah, blah. And then he then talks about this online like he is this thing. In other words, the point of all this is you've got a guy who is categorically lying. So he's lying. It's all about narcissism, about power, about front, and about pretending to people he's a greater knowledge than he really is on certain things. And that's pretty much the same for everything. Elon Musk is not as knowledgeable as you think he is.
Possibly exist to justify this behavior. It's the epitome of everything people hate. It's cringe. It's sensitive. It's an abuse of power. His feelings got hurt, so he used his power as the fucking chief general of Twitter to take away his checkmark because he hurt his feelings, and then he goes on to leak DMs. How could you possibly look at that and be like, no, that makes sense. Elon was in the right here. Like, let's say you just love Elon. You know what? I'm not your dad. You can like whoever you want, like whatever
And what I wanted to do was show you this next part.
you want. Doesn't matter to me. But why do you have to like something and then love everything they ever do? Why can't you be more receptive to, like, you know, I really like Elon, but this was a bad look. I didn't like what he did here. I think this was pretty embarrassing. That's called being normal. For some reason, people just can't be normal anymore. If you like something, you have to be obsessed with it. You have to fucking love it.
So this can be applied to, I've done exactly what he said to you before. I've talked about how you need to be nuanced with someone like Elon Musk, but with everyone, like Donald Trump. Say, I liked what he says over here. I like what he said on this element of policy, but over here he's completely wrong. People have lost the ability to do this. We need to be more nuanced and stop going absolutely deep in and supporting someone to the end of the earth, because then you become just a cult member. So when you are looking at what Trump is going to do going forward, don't just think automatically that everything Trump does has to be and will be brilliant and amazing, and that you have to go full in on your support for him if you are otherwise a Trump supporter. That gets you into trouble. You are treating that person like a god, an infallible god that can do no wrong, an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent being. And that is absolutely problematic.
Love it. You have to be like snorting that drug constantly and shut out and hate everyone who pokes holes in it. It's so weird. I don't know why people want to live their life this way. They just want like the black and white. Elon good. Anyone who said Elon not good, they're bad. Elon good. I don't know why people want that. No one likes to think anymore, and with the way the internet's gone, you don't have to think anymore. You can just wait for tweets to tell you what to think, or even chat GPT to tell you what to think. I guess it's just easier to live your life on like drooling autopilot mode. But I would argue that you are doing yourself a huge disservice in life if you just live this way, where even if you really like Elon, whatever, why not just be receptive to the idea that he's not infallible? Maybe he does make mistakes. Maybe he is cringe sometimes. And you can acknowledge that, recognize that, and then at the end of the day, still like him if you want. It just doesn't compute with me. And of course, it's not exclusive to Elon. It's a very normal thing now all of a sudden, where if you like something or like someone, anything that is brought up that's negative about it is like the end of the world to you, and then you spend hours a day arguing with bots on Twitter about it and defending the thing you like. I just don't get it. Elon Musk.
That is the lesson of today. If you are a big fan of Trump and you've just sat through this massive video of me banging on about Trump, do you just automatically defend him to the hilt? Or do you occasionally go, yeah, that sucks, and yeah, that's probably not good, and actually it does look like he's getting to bed with multi-billionaires, and it does look like we're moving towards oligarchy? Or do you just deny that? Do you just go, no, it's all right, like, this is great because I voted for him and therefore this is all brilliant. It has to be brilliant because otherwise my entire sense of myself, my entire identity falls down like a house of cards. We need to be more robust than us, than that, and how we think and how we go about critically analysing ourselves as much as other people. And yeah, really, really do take that on board. And the final thing here, a photo that Elon Musk has been showing. He said, wow, you know, a lot's happened in 21 years. And this is Elon Musk with Jeff Bezos, and then saying stuff like, oh, we're now besties type thing. Or what was it, this one? Well, no, we'll come to that one in a second. So Elon Musk showed that photo and said, wow, you know, a lot's happened in 21 years, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos in 2024. Just a little reminder that was at an event that was funded primarily by Jeffrey Epstein. So, yeah, just hashtag just saying. And then Elon Musk did this great thing. He shared a Step Brothers meme. Did we just become best friends? Talking about Jeff Bezos. So Step Brothers is a perfect meme for Jeff Bezos and me, says Elon Musk. To which the director of the movie Step Brothers, Adam McKay, said, agreed, you're both irresponsible, self-centered fools living off the work of others. So if you watch a film, that's who those people are in a film. Did we just become best friends? Yes, we did. And you're both irresponsible, self-centered fools living off the work of others. Ouch. Absolutely perfect synopsis of of Elon Musk there. Anyway, I just thought I'd leave you with that. Interesting that he's so anti-trans and not playing around with the body, and the body must, etc., etc. How much work has he had done on his face and his hairline? And you're thinking, you are changing your body. All the protein. I don't know what he does, but he's essentially transed his face, or like it's transhumanism. Actually, I mean that in a slightly different trans. He's transhumanized his face. He's used technology and advanced science to, in his mind, improve the way he looks. And yet, as far as people doing that to other parts of their body, he's like dead against that. So I just find that an interesting thing to look at. That would be a nice topic for a philosophical video. Anyway, take care, guys. That's a lot from me. It was a huge video, but I really wanted to look into the growth of oligarchs in the US political domain, and I think that we are going to have a very fascinating and deeply disturbing 4 years, but it depends on what goes on in the House of Representatives, because there's a very tiny a majority there for the Republicans at the moment, and depends what happens with Mike Turner. That might evaporate to become no majority, in which case some of the things that they want to do might not be able to get done. But we are, and I think we're on a precipice looking at a potential descent into autocracy and oligarchy, where moneyed and powered individuals and elites, the very people that the kind of populist right were railing against, the kind of like, we want to drain the swamp, Again, Trump has basically got into bed with the swamp. Trump is bathing in the swamp and he's delighting in it, and he can't get enough of the swamp, and he's making the swamp even bigger. He's just swampifying the White House. Prove me wrong. Take care, guys. Speak soon.